My name is Madeline Warren, 68 years old, and I never thought my own daughter-in-law would humiliate me in public. After 40 years building my real estate business from nothing, I was proud of what I had accomplished. When Jackson and Amanda moved in temporarily, I noticed her sideways glances at my lifestyle. That fateful night at Le Bistro changed everything. My black card declined. Amanda, smirking across the table, saying those words that still echo in my mind. Before I continue this painful story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like button if you have ever had someone doubt your hard-earned success. I grew up in a small town outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My parents worked at the local factory Honest People, who taught me the value of hard work and integrity. We never had much, but they made sure I had opportunities they never did. I still remember my mother counting pennies at the kitchen table, making sure we could afford my school supplies. Those early lessons in financial responsibility shaped me more than I realized at the time. After high school, while most of my friends were getting married, I took a different path. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college, studying business and accounting at night. During the day, I answered phones at a small real estate office owned by Janet Blackwell, a tough-as-nails businesswoman who took me under her wing. Janet saw something in me that I barely recognized in myself back then. She started letting me handle small listings, teaching me the ins and outs of property valuation, negotiation tactics, and how to close a deal. I soaked up every bit of knowledge she offered, staying late to review contracts and learn the market. By 25, I had saved enough for a down payment on my first investment property. It was nothing special, a rundown duplex that most buyers overlooked. I spent weekends fixing it up myself, painting walls and replacing fixtures, then rented both units for enough to cover the mortgage and put a little aside. That was the beginning of Madeline Properties. I met Frank when he came to inspect the electrical work on my third property. He was kind, hardworking, and had the most infectious laugh. We married 6 months later, combining our dreams and ambitions. Frank kept his electrical business while helping me expand my real estate portfolio. We were partners in every sense of the word. Jackson came along when I was 32. Balancing motherhood with a growing business wasn't easy, but Frank and I made it work. We took turns attending school events and business meetings. Jackson grew up watching us build something from nothing, learning the value of persistence and smart financial planning. At least I thought he had learned those lessons. Over the next 3 decades, Madeline Properties grew from a handful of rental homes to a respected firm managing commercial properties across 3 states. I specialized in identifying undervalued properties with potential, renovating them, and either selling at a profit or maintaining them as income-producing assets. Nothing was handed to me. Every property, every deal was earned through hard work, smart decisions, and sometimes sleepless nights worrying about making payroll. Frank was my rock through it all, encouraging me when deals fell through, celebrating the victories, and reminding me to take time off occasionally. His sudden heart attack 5 years ago left a void that nothing could fill. The business kept me going during those dark days, giving me purpose when grief threatened to overwhelm me. Jackson had graduated with a business degree by then and worked for a marketing firm in Chicago. I had hoped he might join the family business someday, but he had different dreams. I respected that even if I sometimes felt disappointed. After all, I had built Madeline Properties for him as much as for myself. When Jackson called to tell me he had met someone special, I was thrilled. After losing Frank, I wanted nothing more than to see my son happy. Amanda appeared perfect on paper. She came from a good family, had graduated from Northwestern with honors, and worked in public relations. The first time I met her at a dinner Jackson arranged, she was charming and engaging, asking thoughtful questions about my business and complimenting my jacket, which Frank had given me for our 25th anniversary. Their wedding 9 months later was a small affair, just as they wanted. I offered to help financially, but Amanda insisted her parents would cover everything. Later I learned they had taken out loans instead, something that would become a pattern in their financial lives. About a year into their marriage, Jackson called with news that they were struggling. The marketing firm was downsizing, and his position had been eliminated. Amanda's PR firm was cutting back on hours. They were having trouble making rent on their Chicago apartment while paying off student loans and credit card debt. Without hesitation, I suggested they move into my home temporarily. My 5-bedroom house outside Philadelphia had felt too empty since Frank died. Having family around would be a blessing, I thought, and they could save money until they found their footing again. Jackson was grateful, but I sensed reluctance from Amanda during that call. They arrived with 6 suitcases and a moving truck full of furniture we had no room for. I suggested storing most of it, offering to pay the storage fees, but Amanda insisted on cramming as much as possible into the guest rooms. It was the first sign that our living arrangement might be more complicated than I had anticipated. The first few weeks went smoothly. We ate dinner together most nights, sharing stories and laughing. Jackson started job hunting and Amanda worked remotely. I gave them space, maintaining my own routine of morning walks, office hours, and weekly bridge games with friends. But as 1 month turned into 3, I began noticing changes in Amanda's attitude toward me. What started as occasional comments about the size of my house or the brands I preferred evolved into something more pointed, more critical. At first, I brushed it off as the natural tension that comes from multiple adults sharing a space. But looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The shift in Amanda's behavior was subtle at first. When I wore my pearl necklace, a 20th anniversary gift, from Frank to a charity luncheon, she commented, "Must be nice to have real pearls." Mine are all fake, of course. Her tone carried an accusation, as though my owning nice things somehow caused her financial struggles. When I drove my Mercedes, which I had purchased, used, and maintained carefully for 7 years, she would sigh and say, "Some people have all the luck." These comments puzzled me since they contradicted what Jackson had told me about her background. According to my son, Amanda had grown up with considerable privilege. Her father was a surgeon, her mother came from old money, and she had attended private schools her entire life. Yet she now acted as though my middle-class luxuries were ostentatious. One evening, I overheard a phone conversation that shed some light on the situation. Amanda was speaking to someone, presumably a friend, in hushed tones on the back patio. "Living with Jackson's mother is torture," she said. "She flaunts her wealth, constantly designer this, expensive that. Between us, I think most of it is fake. No way a small-time real estate agent has this kind of money unless something shady is going on." I stepped away, hurt and confused. My home was comfortable but hardly lavish. The few luxury items I owned were either gifts from Frank or carefully saved for over many years. Moreover, I had never been just a small-time real estate agent. I had built a company that now employed 15 people and managed properties worth millions. Did Amanda truly not know this? Or was she deliberately diminishing my accomplishments? Jackson found himself caught between his wife and mother. When Amanda made cutting remarks at dinner about my extravagant grocery purchases, I saw him wince but remain silent. Later, when we were alone, he would apologize. "She doesn't mean anything by it, Mom," he would say. "Amanda is just stressed about finding a better job. You know how it is." But I did not know how it was because I had never belittled others when facing my own challenges. Still, for Jackson's sake, I tried to build bridges with Amanda. I invited her shopping, thinking we might bond over finding her professional outfits for interviews. She declined, saying she couldn't bear to watch me throw money around. When I offered to teach her my grandmother's recipes, she said she preferred healthier, more modern cooking. Every overture was rejected, often with a comment that painted me as out of touch or showing off. Meanwhile, Amanda was spreading her perspective to the extended family. My niece called, concerned that I was financially overextended, as Amanda had suggested at a family gathering I had missed due to a business commitment. One Thursday afternoon, Amanda had 2 friends over while I worked in my home office. My door was ajar as they passed in the hallway, and Amanda's voice carried clearly. "This is all for show," she told them, gesturing around my home. "Classic new money behavior, desperate to prove she belongs in high society. Between us, I think she's one missed payment away from losing it all." I sat at my desk staring at spreadsheets that told a very different story. Maitland Properties had weathered the recession through careful management and diversification. We had expanded into commercial real estate and were now exploring international opportunities. In fact, I had been working for months on a major land acquisition in Brazil where we planned to develop an eco-resort with local partners. The deal was complex, requiring numerous international wire transfers and navigation of Brazilian real estate laws. I had kept the details private, not out of secrecy, but because business negotiations at this level required discretion. Moreover, no one in my household had shown much interest in my work. As Amanda's comments became more frequent and more biting, I maintained my dignity. Frank had always said that class isn't about what you own, but how you treat people. I would not lower myself to responding in kind. But neither would I continue to tolerate disrespect in my own home. The Brazilian deal was nearly complete with just the final payment and paperwork remaining. If successful, it would represent the largest expansion in my company's history. After much consideration, I decided to share this news with Jackson and Amanda over dinner. Perhaps understanding the true nature of my business would help reset our relationship. I made reservations at Le Bistro Philadelphia's most elegant new restaurant for the following evening. That night, I laid out my black sheath dress and pearl earrings. For the first time in my business career, I felt the need to visibly demonstrate my success to my own family. The thought made me sad, but I was determined to clear the air once and for all. Le Bistro had opened 6 months earlier to rave reviews. Located in a renovated historic building in Center City, it featured soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and an award-winning chef. Normally, I find such opulent surroundings unnecessary, preferring restaurants where the focus is on food and conversation rather than scenery. But that night, I wanted a special setting to mark what I hoped would be a new beginning for our family. I made the reservation for 7:30, allowing Jackson time to return from his job interviews in the city. He had recently received promising feedback from a digital marketing firm and seemed more optimistic than he had in months. Amanda spent over an hour getting ready, emerging in a black cocktail dress I recognized from a high-end boutique. The price tag would have covered our household expenses for a week, which made her comments about my spending habits all the more confusing. We arrived at the restaurant promptly, the valet taking my car keys with a respectful nod. The maitre d' greeted us warmly. "Mrs. Warren, how lovely to see you again. Your table is ready." Amanda shot me a curious glance. I had never mentioned that Le Bistro was owned by a property management client of mine. We were led to a prime table near the windows overlooking the city lights, a location usually reserved for regular patrons or VIPs. Once seated, Jackson admired the view while Amanda studied the wine list, her eyebrows rising at the prices. I suggested a reasonably priced Cabernet that I knew to be excellent, but Amanda insisted on ordering a more expensive Bordeaux. "If we are celebrating, we might as well do it properly," she said, with a pointed look in my direction. Throughout the appetizer course, Amanda made little comments about the silverware, the decor, and the clientele. "I bet half these people are just pretending to be able to afford this place," she remarked loud enough for nearby diners to hear. Jackson gently kicked her under the table, but she merely shrugged. I maintained my composure, determined not to let her behavior derail the evening. As our entrees arrived, I decided it was time to share my news. "I wanted to have dinner somewhere special tonight because I have something important to tell you both." I began smiling. Maitland Properties is about to complete the largest deal in our company's history. Jackson leaned forward, genuinely interested. "That's great, Mom. What kind of property?" "Actually, it's quite exciting. We've been working for nearly a year on acquiring a large parcel of coastal land in Brazil. We're partnering with local developers to build an eco-friendly resort that will provide jobs for the community while preserving the natural environment." Amanda set down her wine glass with a little too much force. "Brazil, really? That seems a bit ambitious for a local real estate company, doesn't it?" I took a breath before responding. Maitland Properties hasn't been just local for some time now. We manage properties in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, and we've been looking for the right opportunity to expand internationally. "And you can afford something like that?" Amanda's tone was skeptical. "International real estate must cost millions." "The company has been very successful," I said simply. "This project represents years of careful growth and planning." Jackson touched my hand proudly. "Mom built her business from nothing." I've always been amazed by what she's accomplished. That brief moment of support from my son warmed my heart, but it was quickly doused by Amanda's next words. "Stop pretending you have money, mother-in-law." Her voice carried across the restaurant, causing several nearby conversations to halt abruptly. "This whole charade is exhausting. The house, the car, the clothes, this ridiculous restaurant. We all know real estate agents in Philadelphia aren't making that kind of money." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson's face had drained of color, and he stared at his wife in shock. Diners at adjacent tables shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in their meals. Amanda Jackson whispered harshly, "What are you doing?" She flicked her hand dismissively. "Someone needs to say it. Your mother has been putting on airs since we moved in, making me feel small because we're struggling while she parades around in designer clothes. It's time for some honesty." I felt a strange calm descend over me. The worst had happened, the accusation made publicly, and yet I was still sitting here, still breathing. Frank had faced down worse in his time, and he had taught me that dignity in the face of unkindness was its own form of strength. "I think it's time we asked for the check," I said quietly. The waiter, sensing the tension, appeared almost immediately with the bill. I reached for my purse and removed my credit card, a black card I rarely used, but that had seemed appropriate for the occasion. I handed it to the waiter without looking at the total. Amanda's eyes widened at the sight of the card, but her smirk remained firmly in place. As the waiter walked away, she leaned toward Jackson. "Watch what happens," she whispered audibly. "I bet it gets declined." Jackson closed his eyes briefly. "Amanda, please stop." But Amanda was not finished. I found her credit card statements while looking for stamps in her office. "She's maxed out 3 cards already. This whole wealthy businesswoman thing is an act." I sat very still, knowing that my financial documents were securely locked in my office safe. Whatever Amanda had seen, it wasn't my actual financial information. Before I could respond, the waiter returned with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Warren, but there seems to be an issue with your card." Amanda's triumphant I knew, it echoed in the now hushed restaurant. The manager appeared at our table, a tall man named Thomas, who had worked with me on several commercial leases in the past. "Mrs. Warren, could I speak with you for a moment?" As I rose to step aside with him, Amanda announced to the surrounding tables, "See, I told you she was a fraud, probably can't even pay for dinner." I felt color rise in my cheeks, but kept my head high as I followed Thomas to a discreet corner. Behind me, I could hear Jackson finally confronting his wife, his voice low but intense. "What seems to be the problem?" I asked Thomas, although I had a suspicion already. "I'm so sorry about this, Mrs. Warren. Your card has been flagged for potential fraud due to unusual activity. The bank's automatic system has temporarily suspended it pending verification. It's actually quite common with large or international transactions." He lowered his voice further. The message associated with the hold mentioned something about Brazilian currency. The note says, "We still owe 20 million reais for the purchase of the land." The bank flagged it as potentially fraudulent activity. I closed my eyes briefly. The final payment for the Brazilian property had been processed that morning. The fraud alert system had done exactly what it was supposed to do, protecting me from unauthorized charges, but the timing couldn't have been worse. "Is there another card you could use tonight? I can call the bank with you tomorrow to sort this out," Thomas offered kindly. I thanked him and provided another card, one with a much lower limit but sufficient for our dinner. As we walked back to the table, I could see Amanda still talking animatedly, Jackson sitting with his head in his hands. "The card is fine," I said calmly. "There was a security hold due to some international transactions. It happens occasionally with large purchases." Amanda looked disappointed at this explanation, while Jackson seemed relieved. I handed the second card to Thomas, who processed it immediately and returned with the receipt for me to sign. As we gathered our things to leave, I maintained my composure, thanking the staff and leaving a generous tip despite the uncomfortable situation. Outside, the valet brought my car around and we drove home in silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between us. The drive home from Le Bistro was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Jackson stared out the passenger window, his jaw clenched tight. Amanda sat in the back seat, the glow of her phone illuminating her satisfied expression as she typed furiously, likely sharing her version of events with friends. No one spoke until we pulled into the driveway of my home. As the garage door closed behind us, the dam finally broke. "How could you do that?" Amanda Jackson's voice was quiet but trembling with anger. "How could you humiliate my mother in public like that?" Amanda stepped out of the car, slamming the door. "Oh, please, I just said what we've both been thinking. All this wealth is a facade, and tonight proved it." I followed them into the kitchen, setting my purse on the counter with deliberate calm. "I think we need to have an honest conversation." "Yes, let's." Amanda spun to face me. "Let's talk about how you've been pretending to be some successful businesswoman while maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances. Let's talk about how you made us feel small and broke while living beyond your means." Jackson stepped between us. "Amanda, stop it. You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" She turned to him now. "Why do you think your mother's card was declined tonight? Because she can't afford to pay for an expensive dinner, that's why. She's been lying to everyone, including you." I took a deep breath. "My card was not declined because of insufficient funds, Amanda. It was flagged for fraud protection because of unusual activity, specifically, a large international wire transfer that processed today." "Right," she scoffed. "A mysterious international wire transfer for your imaginary Brazilian resort. How convenient." Jackson turned to me, confusion evident in his expression. "Mom, what is going on? I know you've done well with the business, but Amanda says she found some concerning financial documents in your office." The mention of someone going through my private papers without permission should have angered me, but instead it clarified things. "What exactly did you see in my office, Amanda?" She crossed her arms defensively. "I was looking for stamps, and I found credit card statements showing nearly maxed out accounts, and bank statements showing withdrawals of thousands of dollars. You're hemorrhaging money." A piece clicked into place in my mind. Were these statements in a manila folder in the desk drawer? "Yes," she replied triumphantly. "So you can't deny it. Those were your father-in-law's medical bills and credit card statements from 5 years ago before he passed away." I kept my voice even. "Frank's cancer treatments were experimental and not covered by insurance. We charged what we could to credit cards, while liquidating some investments to cover the rest. Those statements were part of my records for the estate taxes." Jackson's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "The withdrawals were to pay for treatments that gave us 3 more months together," I finished softly. "The statements are 5 years old, Amanda." Amanda faltered momentarily but rallied quickly. "That doesn't explain your card being declined tonight. Or this sudden story about a Brazilian resort. You're a local real estate agent, not an international developer." That was the moment I realized how little Amanda knew about me despite living in my home for months. Perhaps I had been too private about my business, too humble about my success, assuming my son had shared that information with his wife. "I haven't been just a real estate agent for over 30 years, I said. Maitland Properties is a development and property management company with commercial holdings across 3 states. We employ 15 people full-time and contract with dozens more." Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought Amanda knew all this. I thought I had explained." "Clearly you didn't," I said gently. "But that doesn't excuse going through my private papers or publicly accusing me of lying." Amanda's face had grown increasingly flushed. "If you're so successful, why was your fancy black card declined? Why should I believe any of this?" I was tired, emotionally drained, and in no mood to defend my life's work to someone who had shown me nothing but disrespect. "You don't have to believe me, Amanda. The truth doesn't require your approval to exist." With that, I left the kitchen and retreated to my study, locking the door behind me. Through the wood, I could hear their argument continue, Jackson's voice rising in defense of me, while Amanda insisted I was hiding financial problems. Sitting at my desk, I called Gerald, my financial advisor of 20 years, despite the late hour. He answered on the second ring. "Madeline, is everything all right?" I explained the situation with the declined card. Gerald confirmed what Thomas had already told me: the transaction had triggered automatic fraud prevention due to both its size and international nature. I can call the bank first thing in the morning to clear it, he assured me. The Brazilian land purchase is proceeding exactly as planned, by the way. The final paperwork should be ready for your signature next week. After thanking him, I sat in silence, contemplating how to address the larger issue of Amanda's behavior and accusations. As I organized my thoughts, I noticed that several items on my desk appeared slightly out of place. The folder containing information about the Brazilian development moved from where I distinctly remembered placing it. Opening my laptop, I checked the security system Frank had insisted on installing years ago. It included cameras in the common areas and exterior of the home, as well as a log of when the code was entered for my study door. The log showed Amanda had entered my study 3 times in the past week, always during hours I was known to be at the office. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. This wasn't just about Amanda finding old financial documents by accident. She had been systematically searching through my private papers, likely looking for evidence to support her narrative about my finances. But why? What would Amanda gain from proving I was less successful than I appeared? The answer came to me slowly as I thought back over the past months. The designer clothes Amanda wore despite claiming financial hardship, the vague references to her wealthy parents who somehow never visited or called, the way she had insisted on a lavish wedding that her parents supposedly paid for, yet Jackson had mentioned taking out loans. I reached for my phone again, this time calling Patricia, an old friend who had worked in banking for decades. "I hate to ask this," I said, after explaining the situation, "but is there any way you could discreetly look into Amanda's financial background? I'm worried there's more going on here than I understand." Patricia's response was cautious but supportive. "I can't access her private banking information, Madeline, that would be illegal. But I can make some calls to mutual acquaintances. If there's public information or common knowledge in certain circles, I might learn something useful." I thanked her and hung up, feeling slightly guilty for investigating my daughter-in-law, but increasingly certain that Amanda's hostility stemmed from something more complex than simple jealousy or misunderstanding. Unable to sleep, I spent the night reviewing documents related to the Brazilian development and preparing for a difficult conversation with Jackson and Amanda. By morning, I had made 2 important decisions. First, I would not allow Amanda's accusations to go unchallenged any longer. Second, I would handle the situation with the same strategic thinking that had built my business, not with the emotional reaction Amanda seemed determined to provoke. As dawn broke, my phone rang. It was Patricia calling with information that confirmed my suspicions and would forever change my understanding of the woman my son had married. "I hope I'm not calling too early," Patricia said, "but I thought you'd want to know what I found right away." I assured her that I had been awake for hours and was grateful for any information she could share. "Amanda's family isn't what she's claimed," Patricia began. "Her father isn't a surgeon, he's a medical equipment salesman. Respectable work, but not the wealthy background she's apparently described. Her mother was a school teacher who passed away when Amanda was in college. This explained some things, but raised more questions." "What about her education?" Jackson said she attended Northwestern. "She did on scholarships and student loans, which she's barely touched. She has nearly $100,000 in student debt that's been in forbearance for years. But that's not the concerning part." Patricia paused and I braced myself. "Amanda has 3 maxed-out credit cards under her maiden name and a judgment against her in Illinois for unpaid rent. There's also a pattern of her dating wealthy men, living beyond her means, and leaving significant debt behind." The picture coming into focus was both sad and alarming. Amanda wasn't just jealous of what she perceived as my wealth. She was desperate to access it, likely hoping that Jackson would inherit enough to solve her financial problems. I thanked Patricia for her help and promised to keep her updated. After hanging up, I sat at my desk considering my next steps. Confronting Amanda directly with this information would likely trigger defensive denial. I needed a more strategic approach. First, I called my lawyer David and scheduled a meeting for later that day. Then I contacted Gerald again, asking him to prepare a comprehensive overview of my actual financial situation including documentation of the Brazilian development deal. Finally, I texted Jackson asking him to meet me at my office downtown at 3 o'clock and to bring Amanda. "It's time we cleared up some misunderstandings," I wrote. His reply came quickly. "We'll be there. I'm sorry about last night, Mom." I spent the morning at my company headquarters, meeting with my management team about ongoing projects and briefing them on the Brazilian development's progress. My assistant noticed my distraction but didn't comment, efficiently handling calls and visitors while I gathered my thoughts. At noon, David arrived with the documents I had requested, and we spent an hour discussing options. He was concerned about the situation but supported my approach of transparency combined with firm boundaries. "You're being more generous than many would be in your position," he noted, as we reviewed the papers he had drawn up. "She's still my son's wife," I replied. "How I handle this will affect my relationship with Jackson for years to come." By 2:30, my conference room was prepared. Gerald had arrived with financial statements and projections. The Brazilian development plans were displayed on the large screen, and copies of relevant documents were arranged at each seat. At precisely 3 o'clock, my assistant showed Jackson and Amanda in. Jackson looked tired but resolute. Amanda wore an expression of confident smugness that faltered slightly when she saw David and Gerald already seated at the table. "Thank you both for coming," I began professionally. "After last night's unfortunate incident, I believe it's important that we all have a clear understanding of certain facts." Amanda started to speak, but Jackson placed a hand on her arm. "Let's listen, Amanda." "First," I continued, "I'd like to address the accusation that I have been pretending to have more financial success than is actually the case." I nodded to Gerald, who distributed folders containing financial statements, property portfolios, and company valuations. Maitland Properties currently manages 62 commercial properties and 97 residential units across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Our annual revenue last year was $8.7 million, with a net profit of $3.2 million. Amanda's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, each showing a different property or financial summary. The card decline last night was due to a security hold placed automatically when this transaction processed. I clicked a button bringing up documentation of the wire transfer on the screen. 20 million Brazilian reais, approximately $4 million US, representing the final payment on this property. The screen changed to show aerial views of a beautiful coastal property. "This is our newest development, an eco-resort in partnership with Brazilian investors. The project has been in negotiation for 11 months and will break ground next quarter." I turned to face Amanda directly. My black card was not declined due to insufficient funds or maxed out credit. It was temporarily suspended because the bank's fraud detection system was protecting me from what it perceived as unusual activity. Thomas, the restaurant manager, explained this to me, and Gerald confirmed it this morning with the bank. Amanda's expression had shifted from smugness to uncertainty, but she rallied quickly. "If you're so wealthy, why do you live in such a modest home? Why drive a 7-year-old car? It doesn't add up." Because true wealth isn't about showing off Amanda. It's about security, freedom, and choices. I live comfortably but not extravagantly because that's what makes me happy. The business reinvests most of its profits for growth, as successful companies do. Jackson looked from the documents to me, a mix of pride and embarrassment on his face. "Mom, I had no idea the company had grown this much. You never talk about it." "I've never felt the need to broadcast my success," I said simply. "But perhaps my privacy has contributed to some misunderstandings." I took a deep breath before continuing. "Which brings me to the second issue we need to discuss. Amanda, you have been searching through my private papers without permission." Her face flushed. "I was looking for stamps. 3 times last week, always when I was known to be at the office, I placed the security log on the table. The system records every time someone enters the code to my study." Jackson turned to his wife in shock. "You went into Mom's study without permission. Why would you do that?" Amanda's composure cracked. "I was trying to protect you. I thought she was hiding financial problems that would affect your inheritance. I was looking out for our future." The room fell silent at this admission. I glanced at David, who nodded slightly, indicating it was time for the next phase of our conversation. Amanda Jackson, I need to be direct about something. The living arrangement we agreed to was temporary to help you both get back on your feet financially. It's been 6 months now, and I haven't seen evidence of a plan to move toward independence. Jackson looked down at his hands. I know, Mom. I've been trying. The job market has been tough. You've had 3 interviews in 6 months, Jackson, I said gently. And Amanda, you've reduced your hours at the PR firm rather than increasing them. The commute is too long, she protested. The office is 15 minutes from my house, I countered. But that's not the point. The point is that I think our current arrangement is no longer healthy for any of us. David slid a document across the table. This is a new agreement regarding your living arrangements. Mrs. Warren is prepared to provide a loan, not a gift, to help you secure an apartment of your own. The terms are more than fair interest, free with minimal monthly payments beginning after 6 months. Jackson took the paper, scanning it quickly. Mom, you don't have to do this. We can find our own place. With what money? Amanda blurted. We can barely afford groceries. It was the opening I had been waiting for. That brings me to my final concern. Amanda, there seems to be a significant discrepancy between your described financial background and reality. Her face went pale. Your father is not a surgeon. You have substantial student loan debt, and there are multiple maxed-out credit cards in your maiden name. You've misrepresented your financial situation to both Jackson and me. Jackson stared at his wife. Is this true? What about your parents paying for our wedding? Amanda's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she buried her face in her hands. I was ashamed, she sobbed. My family isn't special or wealthy. Dad sells medical equipment to the surgeons I told you he worked with. Mom was a teacher who died of breast cancer my sophomore year. I took out loans for everything, the wedding, my clothes, even our honeymoon. The revelation hung in the air between us. Jackson looked stunned, processing this new information about the woman he had married. I thought when we moved in with your mom we'd eventually get help with our debts, Amanda continued. Everyone said she was successful in real estate, but then we arrived and she lived so simply. I thought she was lying about her success just like I had been. So you decided to prove it by searching through my private papers and publicly humiliating me, I asked quietly. I was desperate, she whispered. We're drowning in debt and I didn't know what else to do. I looked at my son, seeing the confusion and hurt in his eyes. This was not just about Amanda's lies or my boundaries, it was about his marriage and future happiness. I'm offering you both a choice, I said firmly. Option 1. You can accept the loan to get your own place, but only if you both agree to financial counseling and therapy, both as a couple and Amanda individually. Option 2. You can continue your current path without my financial support, but not while living in my home. Amanda looked up in alarm. You're kicking us out. I'm establishing healthy boundaries, I corrected, and offering help with conditions that address the real problems, not just the symptoms. Jackson straightened his shoulders, and in that moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I had raised him to be. Amanda, we need to talk privately. He turned to me. Can we have some time to discuss this, Mom? I nodded, rising from my chair. Take all the time you need in here. I'll be in my office when you're ready to talk. As I walked out, leaving them to what would surely be a difficult conversation, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The truth was finally out, painful as it was. Now we could all begin to heal one way or another. I sat in my office reviewing emails, giving Jackson and Amanda the privacy they needed for their discussion. After about 40 minutes, my assistant knocked softly. Jackson would like to see you, Mrs. Warren. Alone. My heart sank a little at the word alone, but I nodded. Send him in, please. My son entered, his face showing the strain of the past 24 hours. He closed the door and took the seat across from my desk. Where's Amanda? I asked, gently. She's still in the conference room. She needed some time. He rubbed his eyes tiredly. Mom, I don't even know where to start. How about with how you're feeling right now? He gave a humorless laugh. Confused, angry, embarrassed. Pick one. He looked at me directly. I had no idea she was going through your things or that she'd lied about her background. I swear I would have said something. I believe you, I assured him. You've never been dishonest with me. But I was blind, he said bitterly. I believed everything she told me without question. What kind of fool does that make me? It makes you someone who trusted the person he loves, I said. There's no shame in that. Jackson shook his head. There is when you keep trusting after seeing warning signs. The way she talked to you in your own home. I should have stood up for you more strongly. I knew something wasn't right, but I kept making excuses. We all have blind spots when it comes to people we care about. That's just it, he said, leaning forward. I do care about her, Mom. Despite everything. She's been lying about her background, about her finances, even about her feelings toward you. But when I asked her why, what came out was so much pain and insecurity. I waited, letting him process his thoughts. Her mother's death hit her harder than I realized. She was 19 suddenly without her biggest supporter. Her father remarried quickly to a woman who made it clear Amanda wasn't welcome in their new life. She put herself through college alone, taking out loans, and working multiple jobs. That must have been very difficult, I acknowledged. It was. But instead of being honest about her struggles, she created this fiction of privilege to hide her shame and pain. He sighed deeply. The lying is inexcusable, especially how she treated you. But I understand it better now. I considered my next words carefully. Understanding doesn't mean you have to accept harmful behavior, Jackson. I know. He straightened. That's why I told her I agree with your conditions. We need therapy both together and separately. She needs to address her issues with money and honesty, and I need to learn to stop enabling behavior that hurts people I love. He paused. Including you, Mom. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away. That sounds like a mature decision. There's more, he continued. I told Amanda that I'm going to look for a job more aggressively, including positions outside of marketing if necessary. And that she needs to increase her hours at the firm or find full-time work elsewhere. These are all positive steps, I said approvingly. One last thing, Jackson added. I'd like to learn more about Madeline Properties. Not to join the company necessarily, but to understand what you've built. I realize now that I've taken your success for granted, without appreciating how extraordinary it really is. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a genuine smile form. I'd like that very much. Can we ask Amanda to join us now? He asked. There are things she needs to say to you. I nodded and Jackson went to get his wife. When they returned, Amanda's eyes were red-rimmed, her confident demeanor replaced by genuine contrition. Mrs. Warren Madeline, she began hesitantly. I owe you an apology. What I did was inexcusable, going through your private papers, making accusations, embarrassing you in public. There's no justification for my behavior. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. I've been living a lie for so long that I started seeing deception everywhere, even where it didn't exist. I convinced myself you were fake because it made me feel better about my own fakeness. She wiped at a tear. Jackson and I have agreed to your conditions. We'll find our own place, get counseling, and work on our finances honestly. What about your debt? I asked directly. Amanda flinched, but answered truthfully. About $87,000 in student loans, $26,000 in credit cards, and we still owe $15,000 on the wedding, plus the personal loans from friends that Jackson didn't know about until today. The total was substantial but not insurmountable, with proper planning and commitment. Financial counseling will help you create a manageable repayment plan, I said, and it will be your plan, not mine. I'm offering a loan for housing to get you started, not a bailout for everything. I understand, she said quietly. And I'm grateful for even that much considering how I've behaved. There's something else you should know, I added, my tone firming. I've asked David to prepare a postnuptial agreement protecting Jackson's potential future inheritance. Given the circumstances, I think it's a reasonable precaution. Jackson looked uncomfortable but nodded. We discussed it already, Mom. Amanda agrees it's fair. Amanda swallowed hard. It is fair. I haven't given you any reason to trust me with your legacy. Her admission surprised me. Perhaps there was hope for genuine change after all. One last thing, I said, looking at them both. Whatever happens between you two going forward, there need to be new boundaries and expectations in our relationship. I will always be Jackson's mother, and I will always care about his happiness. But I will not tolerate dishonesty or disrespect in my home or my business again. That's more than fair, Jackson agreed. Amanda nodded silently beside him. We spent the next hour discussing practical details, the loan terms, apartment hunting, and a timeline for moving out. By the end, we had a clear plan that everyone had contributed to and agreed upon. It wasn't the warm family reconciliation part of me had hoped for, but it was honest and realistic, a foundation we could potentially build from. As they prepared to leave, Amanda paused at the door. I really am sorry, Madeline. Not just for getting caught, but for what I did. You deserved better, especially after opening your home to us. Thank you for saying that, I replied. We all make mistakes. The measure of a person is what they do next. After they left, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the Philadelphia skyline as evening fell. The confrontation had been difficult but necessary. I had stood my ground with dignity, protected my son while respecting his autonomy, and offered a path forward that balanced compassion with accountability. Frank would have been proud. In fact, I could almost hear his voice. That's my Madeline, strong as steel, but never hard-hearted. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt at peace with how I had handled things. The weeks following our confrontation were busy but productive. Jackson and Amanda found a modest one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from my home. It was nothing luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and within their budget, with the help of my loan. They moved out exactly 2 weeks after our meeting, a bittersweet day for all of us. I helped them unpack, bringing a few housewarming gifts, practical things like kitchen supplies and towels. Amanda accepted them with genuine gratitude without the defensive edge that had characterized our earlier interactions. Once they were settled, our contact became less frequent but more genuine. Jackson called regularly to update me on their progress. He had found a position with a small digital marketing agency, and though the salary was lower than his previous job, he approached it with new determination. Amanda had increased her hours at the PR firm and taken on freelance work on weekends. According to Jackson, she was also attending therapy faithfully, beginning to address the deep insecurities that had driven her deceptive behavior. Meanwhile, the Brazilian land deal closed successfully. We broke ground on the eco-resort the following month with local news coverage and congratulations from business associates. I sent Jackson the links to the press releases, and his pride in my accomplishment came through clearly in his response. 3 months after they moved out, I received a thick envelope in the mail. Inside was a handwritten letter from Amanda, 8 pages long. It began with a genuine apology, acknowledging the hurt she had caused, without excuses or deflection. She wrote about her therapy journey, the painful truths she was facing about herself, and her commitment to becoming more honest and secure. What touched me most was her reflection on watching me handle the situation with dignity. You could have exposed me publicly, cut us off completely, or made things so much worse, she wrote. Instead, you offered consequences with compassion. You've shown me what true class and strength look like, and I hope someday to earn your respect. The letter ended with a tentative invitation to meet for coffee, just the two of us, if I felt ready for that step. After careful consideration, I texted her to suggest a time and place. Our coffee meeting was awkward at first, but gradually evolved into a real conversation. Amanda spoke about her financial counseling sessions, how she and Jackson were working together to tackle their debt systematically. She had created a spreadsheet tracking every payment, watching the totals slowly decrease each month. It's actually empowering, she admitted, facing the real numbers instead of hiding from them. Jackson and I have weekly budget meetings now. No secrets, no separate accounts. That's an excellent practice, I told her. Frank and I did the same thing throughout our marriage. Jackson told me about his father, she said carefully. How much you loved each other, what a team you were. I'm sorry I never got to meet him. He would have liked you, I found myself saying, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Frank valued honesty above almost everything else. He would have appreciated your efforts to change. As winter turned to spring, our family began a careful healing process. Instead of financial assistance beyond the initial housing loan, I offered Jackson and Amanda something more valuable: financial education. We met monthly to discuss basic principles of money management, investment strategies, and the importance of living below your means. I wish someone had taught me this years ago, Amanda said during one such session. My parents never talked about money except to say we didn't have enough. I learned to see wealth as something magical, that other people had, not something built through consistency and smart choices. Many people feel that way, I assured her. Financial literacy should be taught in schools, but rarely is. We learn by example, and if our examples weren't good, we have to find new ones. On the anniversary of our confrontation, Jackson suggested a family dinner, not at an expensive restaurant, but at their apartment. Amanda had become an enthusiastic cook, learning to create delicious meals on a budget. She served a beautiful pasta dish with vegetables from the farmer's market, proudly explaining how she had planned the menu to be special but affordable. As we ate, I noticed the changes in both of them. Jackson seemed more confident, more his own man, rather than someone caught between two women. Amanda's designer clothes had been replaced by simpler attire, but she wore it with a genuine comfort that her expensive outfits had never conveyed. We have some news, Jackson announced as Amanda brought out dessert. We've paid off the first credit card completely. $15,000 down. And Amanda added with a shy smile, I've been promoted at work. The raise will go directly to the debt repayment fund. I raised my water glass in a toast. I'm proud of you both. Not just for the financial progress, but for the work you've put into yourselves. Later that evening, as Jackson walked me to my car, he hugged me tightly. Thank you for not giving up on us, Mom. On me. I would never give up on you, I assured him. You're the best thing I've ever done. Better than a multinational eco-resort, he teased. Infinitely better, I answered seriously. Business success means nothing without people to share it with. Your father taught me that. In the year that followed, I found my relationship with Jackson and Amanda transforming into something I had never expected. A genuine friendship between adults who respected each other. The wounds healed not without scars, but with the strength that comes from facing difficult truths together. Amanda eventually became one of my strongest supporters, defending me fiercely when others underestimated me because of my age or gender. My mother-in-law built an international business from nothing, she would say proudly. Never judge someone's success by how loudly they broadcast it. The experience changed me as well. I became more open about my business achievements, realizing that my privacy, while comfortable, had sometimes been misconstrued as secrecy or even deception. I started a foundation to support financial literacy for young women, drawing on the lessons from our family's painful journey. The Brazilian eco-resort opened 18 months after breaking ground, creating jobs for the local community while preserving the natural beauty of the coast. Jackson and Amanda attended the grand opening with me, a family united in celebrating a dream realized. As I stand now on my back porch, watching the sunset and reflecting on the journey of the past 2 years, I'm struck by how our most painful moments can lead to necessary growth. The humiliation of that restaurant scene, the betrayal of trust, the confrontation, all led to a stronger, more honest relationship than we might have developed otherwise. I've learned that protecting your dignity doesn't mean holding grudges. It means standing firmly for what's right, while leaving room for others to change and grow. It means setting boundaries with love rather than anger. Most importantly, it means recognizing that true wealth isn't measured in property portfolios or credit cards, but in relationships built on mutual respect and honesty. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with someone who underestimated or misjudged you? How did you balance setting boundaries with leaving room for reconciliation? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more of my experiences. Remember, sometimes the people who challenge us the most also give us the greatest opportunity to discover our own strength. Thank you for listening, and I wish you wisdom and grace in your own family journeys.